Hey, everybody, welcome to this webinar called How to Start a Podcast. My name is Zorik Sia, and I am your podcast instructor and trainer for today. Thanks for taking the time. Today it's a Saturday, 10 a.m. I'm sure that you have other things to do, but thanks for spending it with us. So, today we're going to talk about how to start a podcast and actually grow it. Um, so, just to give a quick rundown on how this is going to work. So, we'll go for about an hour and a half and we'll leave plenty of time for questions. We're streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. So, if you have any questions, just please write them down in the chat. And Rafaela, our team member, can get with you. She'll be monitoring all of the sources. So, if you have any questions, just let us know. We do have a Google meeting running. So, if you have any questions there too, you can actually unmute your microphone and ask us questions. Um, the audience on YouTube cannot hear you, so I'll be restating your question before answering. All right. And so, again, today we are here to talk about how to start a podcast, but more importantly, how to actually grow it, whether that means building an audience, a brand, or even generating opportunities from it. All right. All right. Let's get started. So moving on to the next slide here. So here's exactly what we're going to cover today. First of all, I will walk you through how to start a podcast step by step. Then we'll go into what you really need, equipment, setup, and all of that without overcomplicating it. And then we'll also talk about how to stay consistent because that's where most people drop off, to be honest. So the average podcaster records about 7 podcast episodes and stops. So, how do we break through that? We'll talk about that later. And then towards the end, I'll show you how to actually grow this. So, whether that's building an audience, your brand, or even turning it into opportunities. So, moving on to the next slide here. The reality about podcasting. Here's the reality about podcasting. Starting one is really actually pretty easy. You can get a mic, you can hit record, you can upload it, and you're live. But growing the podcast is actually where most people struggle. In fact, most people don't make it past a handful of episodes, just a few episodes, actually. Um, and it's not because people aren't capable of running a podcast and starting a podcast. It's because they don't have a clear direction or even a system behind it. So we'll talk about a system on how to promote your podcast later on in the slides. Now, who is this for? If you're a content creator and want to grow your audience, this is for you. If you're a professional, maybe a realtor, a therapist, consultant, and you want to build your brand or authority, this webinar is for you. If you're a business owner looking to create content or attract opportunities, this is for you too. And honestly, if you're just getting started and just don't know what to do and you're just trying to figure this out, you're in the right place. So in the chat there, wherever you're watching or listening, whether YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, let me know. Are you here to grow your brand? Are you here to grow your audience? Are you here for your business? Are you here for lead generation? Let me know so we can tailor the questions later, the Q&A later. So let me know. All right. Now, why start a podcast? Before we get into how to start, let's talk about why you even want to do this. Number one, a podcast is the best way to build your brand. It helps you grow your audience over time. It gives you a platform to share your expertise consistently. And one of the biggest things is that it opens up opportunities, right? And that's what we're all looking for. So, now, before we even think about recording, this is the most important step. We have to think, you have to start with the end in mind. So ask yourself, what is your goal with this podcast? Who are you trying to reach? And what do you want this to lead to? Do you want it to lead to sales, to promoting your book, to just building authority? Because if you don't answer these questions up front, everything becomes random. You just post, you just record, and there's really no direction, and you don't know when to stop, when to continue. Um, and also your audience will be unclear, and finally your podcast won't grow, right? So most of the successful podcasts that we see out there have a goal and end in mind, right? So the people who we succeed the most have a very clear direction from the beginning. So So make sure you have a goal, make sure you know who your audience is, and then make sure you know what you want this to lead to, whether it's sales, whether it's more clients, whether it's just even just to have fun. If you just want to have fun, that's fine too. So just make sure you have your goals in mind. Now, choosing your niche. Now let's talk about your niche, because this is where a lot of podcasts go wrong. Most people try to talk about everything. Try to talk about everything, and when you talk to everyone, you connect with no one. Instead, you want to get very clear on three things: who are you actually talking to? What problem are you helping them with? And why they should listen to you specifically. You don't need to be the best in the world, but you just need to know, you need to ask yourself these things. But you do need to be clear and relevant to a specific audience, because the more focused you are on a topic, the faster you grow. For example, instead of starting up a business podcast, you might want to do a podcast for realtors trying to grow their social media. Or instead of a podcast, let's stick with the realtor example. Maybe you want to start a podcast for home buyers, first time home buyers specifically, right? So again, try to niche down as much as possible. And it helps you find that audience, right? So okay, so moving on to the next, uh, choosing your podcast format. So once you know your niche, the next step is choosing your format. So there's no right format. There's interview format. There's so many different formats out there. But we'll walk through each. So solo, this is just you sharing your thoughts, right? Teaching or breaking things down. Maybe this is like me talking to y'all. It could be talking about first time home buying. It could be talking about developing software, you name it, right? So this is solo. Interview is when you bring on guests, which is great for networking and different perspectives. Co-host is obviously 2 or 3 people or 4 people. We've even seen 5 people in a podcast, which is kind of difficult. But you and someone or some folks go back and forth, or hybrid. You just mix some of these aspects depending on the episode. So maybe some episodes you go solo, some you bring on a guest through an interview, or maybe your co-host can't always be there, so maybe you do a few episodes with your co-host and then you do one solo. So there's many ways to do it, but there's no wrong way to do it. But most people that we see, they start with interviews because it feels a lot easier, right? Because when you have 2 people, then you're bouncing ideas off of each other. Here, when I'm speaking by myself, I have to have an agenda, I have to have talking points. But when you're talking to somebody else, you still need an agenda, you still need talking points, but you can bounce ideas off of each other. And it's a much easier conversation when it's you or multiple people, right? But actually, solo content is actually where you build the most authority. So, for example, I keep going to realtor, but if you're a realtor or you're a speaker, or maybe you are a therapist, if you have talking head interviews, or just you yourself, or talking head podcasts, that's where you build the most authority. So now I'm just interested here. So let me know in the chat if you're thinking about solo or co-host or hybrid style podcast formats. All right. Okay. So moving on. Structuring your episode. So it's super simple. Let's break down what an actual episode looks like. So you don't need anything complicated. Simple works best. So first is the hook. So this is where you grab attention right away. So we have other webinars and other training where we talk about the hook, because the hook and your thumbnail on YouTube, and that is the most important thing, because you have 8 seconds to grab the audience. So while someone's scrolling, they might stop and listen to like something very jarring or something very emotional, but that is the time, and that's where that content goes. So you want to front load all the information in the beginning of your podcast episode, right? It's kind of like, in traditional filmmaking, you do that at the end, but with podcasting, you need to put the most emotional, the highlight of your show in the beginning. Now, again, you only have a few seconds to make someone stay. Then your intro. So that's who you are, what the podcast is about. So keep it short. And with your intro, we recommend 10 to 20 seconds. Even 20 seconds nowadays is super long. So what we've seen most people do is they'll go into their intro, which is like 2 or 3 seconds. It could be their logo. It could be literally, sometimes people skip it because they kind of already know who you are. But keep this super short because, again, you're up against the clock and you're up against people's attention span. So you have to do it really quick, right? And then after that, you jump into your main content. And this is where you deliver all of your value. So in your main content, let's say you're talking about the Super Bowl, right? We recommend segmenting your content to different sections, right? So you can keep the discussion on track with an agenda. But this is where you deliver your value. So basically, your hook is kind of teasing what happened in the podcast, and then the main content. This is where you deliver on your promise of a great show, right? And it's all about a great show. I know a lot of people talk about there's so many different things like SEO and titles, but if you have a great show, you've written a lot of good content and you've executed on that content, then that's what keeps people going back to your podcast, right? So, and then finally, this is your outro. Where this is where most people actually fail in their outro because really they skip this part, and that's a big mistake. So your outro needs to include like your call to action, like check out our website, subscribe, download, buy my product, right? Because you have to tell the user, you have to tell the listener what to do next. So do not skip this part. That's a big mistake. Again, it could be even, book me for a speaking engagement. So there's lots of things you can say at the end, but make sure you always have a call to action. A lot of people have call to actions in the beginning too. So whenever you start your show, you can say, hey, like and subscribe, or hey, check out our website. And then a lot of folks also have a call to action in the middle, and they say the same thing, and then at the end as well, so that so the folks know where to go after this, right? And so that actually also directly increases your follower count, your viewer count, listener count, and all that stuff. So please make sure that you have call to action in all of your podcast episodes. Now, moving on to the next thing, this is one of the biggest questions that people have whenever they start their podcast is what the heck do I even talk about? And this is where most people overcomplicate it. You don't need to be super creative. You just need to be relevant, maybe timely with what's going on in the world, or maybe you're doing something like a topic that never changes, like first time home buying or something like that. So talk about questions your audience is already asking. So if you're a realtor, I'm sure you get calls every day, emails every day about the same thing, the same questions. So talk about that in your podcast. Make that a specific podcast episode. Talk about problems you can help solve. Maybe talk about fitness, right? And talk about how I was able to increase my 1 kilometer speed by doing XYZ, eating right, exercising more, doing these exercises or running more per week. But talk about problems that you help solve. Also, share experiences of what you've learned and what you've seen. And honestly, the best conversations, the best content comes from conversations that you're already having. So this is maybe your clients are already talking about this. Maybe this is a recurring theme in your business or within your team, within your business. So those are great items you can talk about in your podcast as well. And if someone has asked this something once, then there's a good chance that other people are wondering the same thing. And it's okay, right? It's okay if they've been asking the same thing. It's okay that you've covered it already. But that is something that you can talk about in your podcast. Now, moving on to something important too. One of the easiest ways to get started is and stay consistent is bringing on guests. You do not need to overthink this. Start with people that you already know, your network, colleagues, friends, and family. Then expand into people in your industry or space. Guests bring different perspectives, different experiences. You can write all the questions in the world and you think you know what they're going to say. But we've had guests on podcasts that were like, "Oh, I didn't know that about you," or "This conversation went in a total different way than I thought it'd go." So guests bring on different perspectives, and one of the biggest benefits is that they help expand your reach, right? So when someone comes to your podcast as a guest, they're likely to share it with their network, with their Instagram friends and followers, or their Facebook followers. Maybe they email it to their clients, or maybe they send it on LinkedIn or post it on LinkedIn. So it puts you in front of new audiences, which is great. So that's also a tactic that we teach. Whenever you record something with a guest, make sure that you ask your guest to share all of the podcast episode information, your podcast information, to their network, right? And once they bring on your network, you're just building onto your own network, right? You're expanding your audience. So and if you're nervous about creating content, interviews are the easiest way to start. I know when I was practicing speaking alone, it's nerve wracking, right? It's by yourself. There can be silence, but when you have someone with you to bounce ideas off of, it's so much easier. So now let's talk about equipment. I'll keep this very, very simple. We go back and forth about how deep and how technical should these webinars be. But today we'll keep it very simple. You don't need a full studio to get started. So at a basic level, you need what I have there: a microphone. You need a camera, which can honestly be just your iPhone to start. It could be the camera on your laptop, and some lighting, natural lighting. You can get a cheap ring light. You can use your ceiling light that I have here. Any light works, right? And then something to record on, like your camera, even your phone. A lot of people start their podcast on their cell phone, but that's it. So here's one big point. Don't let equipment be the reason you don't start a podcast. I know a lot of folks actually get hung up on the technical aspect of starting a podcast, but you know what? I recommend starting with what you have, because you can always upgrade later. And what really matters is getting started, not the camera brand, not the um, you know, not the set, honestly, not the lens that you have, not the microphone. A lot of people think about that, but don't let that stop you, because you just need anything: a camera, your phone, and a mic to get started. Now, um, now there's a difference between getting started and leveling up, right? So on the left side, the starter setup, that is where most people begin, and that's perfectly fine. I have a USB microphone myself, and I prefer that because whenever I go on the road or travel or go to client offices, it's easier for me to bring a USB mic around. Now, but on the right side, as you grow, production quality can matter, right? So better audio, better video, better experience for your audience. It all adds up. And what I like to say too is we recommend starting with whatever you have, because really I think the most important thing is putting on a great show, delivering great content, right? And so once you have the basics down, sorry, it's not really basics, but once you have that flow down, the process down, you know how to talk to client, you know how to talk on a mic, on a camera, you know how to structure a show, then I would recommend moving to like a studio microphone, like a Shure microphone, and we can send you a link to all different equipment we recommend. Um, Even multiple cameras, right? You can go multiple cameras. You can spend tens of thousands of dollars on cameras, and we do help clients set stuff up. And you can, and it does look great, and it does make a difference at the end. So yeah, but as you grow, again, production quality, it does matter as you grow. Um, and this is where people either invest time learning it, or they work with a team to handle it. So you don't need this to start, but you'll want if you'll want to if you're serious about growing. So again, you can start in your own home, you can start in the studio, you can start anywhere you want to, but don't let the equipment slow you down. Just start. Okay, so moving on to the next slide here. So common mistakes to avoid. I keep talking about this, but let me save you some time. Here are some common mistakes people make when starting a podcast. Number one, they're overthinking the equipment, right? They spend weeks researching instead of starting. I think one misconception is that it's very expensive to start a podcast, but it's not really that expensive. I mean, you probably already have what's needed from work, right? From your work or your phone. So don't think about the cost or think about the different brands and technical aspects, right? Second is inconsistency. A lot of folks, they record a few episodes and they're very motivated, they're ready to go, they want to be the next big podcaster. um but then they realize that there's a ton of work to do, it's a lot of time, and then they stop. So make sure to understand that when you do this, you need to be consistent. I would say you don't really see results until even 9 months. So that's 9 months of posting an episode, twice a month, or even once a week. So make sure that you're consistent. And by the time you've hit your ninth month, you've learned probably so much about yourself. You've learned so much about your guests and your show, and you might want to take your show in a different direction. So be consistent and make sure you commit to being consistent. Third, no clear direction. So they don't know who they're talking to or why, right? Again, I talked about this in a few slides ago, that you make sure you have some goals for your podcast. Don't just say, I want to start a podcast. Make sure you say, I want to start a podcast and grow my business. I want to start a podcast and build my authority. I want to start a podcast and be a better speaker. So there's lots of reasons why to start a podcast, but make sure you have a clear direction. And probably the biggest one is focusing on perfection instead of progress. So we have had clients in the past that wanted us to remove every and ah, every white space, every white noise, every little thing in their first few episodes. And we recommend not doing that, because you're going to grow into a better podcaster as you record, right? Mr. Beast, everyone knows Mr. Beast here, but Mr. Beast says to improve upon one thing every episode. So record an episode, look back, and change it and see if you can improve it. Whether maybe it's a better agenda, or maybe it's a better script. Maybe your opening could be better. Maybe your editing could be better. Maybe you could have put a better highlight in the beginning. So don't focus on perfection. Focus on progress, like getting to that ninth month, right? So your first episodes don't need to be perfect, and they're not going to be perfect, and that's completely fine. But what matters is that you start, you learn, and you improve over time, right? So you record your first few episodes, you look back and jot down, okay, I want to improve all these things, and your next one, you do that, you improve those things, right? So make sure, again, learn these common mistakes because they happen. Okay, so moving on to how do you record a podcast? So there's a few different ways to do this, and it depends on your setup. Number one, you can record directly to a camera if you're doing a video podcast. So right now I have a camera. It's a Sony ZV-E10, and it's facing me. But the camera also will take audio, right? So you can take the audio and the video, and put your SD card in the camera and record, and that's it. Now, the next way to do it is you can record on your laptop, literally like a Zoom meeting. So there's applications like Riverside.fm, there's Descript, and there's other applications where you can record directly on your laptop. Even a Google Meet, you can record, and Zoom. And that's all you need, because it has a microphone in your laptop and you have a camera. So you can record on your laptop, especially if you're doing audio or remote interviews. Or you can use a mixer or a recording device. So what a mixer does is it takes multiple microphone inputs, and it combines them into one audio file that you can upload to Spotify or YouTube or whatever you want, or Apple. But yeah, so mixers give you more control, but is it necessary in the beginning? I don't think so. And there's no right way to do this, so it just depends on your setup goals. So for example, if you're just doing audio, then all you need is something like Riverside FM. I think it's about $20 a month, but that is similar to a Zoom meeting or a Zoom call, and it will record your video and your audio, and you can even edit within Riverside FM. So check that out. Now, again, there's no wrong way. If you want something more like multi-camera, multi-angles, then obviously, get multiple cameras. If you have a couple of folks that are speaking in the microphones, or two people or three people, you need a mixer for that. So make sure you purchase a mixer. There's a lot of good brands out there like Rode, Mackie. So there's many different options out there. So, and just to continue talking about this, here's a simple way to think about it. So one option is microphone into your laptop. So this is a microphone. It's actually a USB microphone that goes into my laptop. And then this is the simplest setup. So microphone into your laptop, and you can use your webcam. So I have a Mac right here, and you can use a webcam. I'm not using the Mac's webcam, but that's the simplest setup. Or actually, the simplest setup is just your laptop. Option 2 is a microphone into your camera. You can do that as well. So I can connect this using an audio jack into my camera. It does accept a microphone, so you can do that. And the microphone here just makes it sound a little bit better than the microphone on the camera or the microphone on the laptop. So you can hear the difference for sure. And then option 3 is a more advanced setup. These microphones run into a mixer. Let's say you have 3 or 4 people recording, and you can just press record on the mixer, and that's it. So again, though, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but that's how you can get started, and start simple and improve over time. Now that you understand the setup, here's a full process, and you probably have more questions, so we can save some time for questions at the end. So moving on to the next slide here. Let me simplify the entire process for you. So at a high level, this is what it looks like. First, plan your episode. So get your guest, and then figure out what you're going to talk about. So we recommend putting an agenda together, an agenda together. Write down the questions that you might ask your guests. Write down topics. If there's some commercials you want to mention or businesses you want to mention, write that down too. But identify, who you're going to talk about and what you're going to talk about, and then when, right? So I think one of the biggest issues that we see is scheduling, guest scheduling. So just watch out, because sometimes, your guest might be busy or you might be busy. So spend some time. You might need to spend some time with guest scheduling. That does take a little time. Also, the next step is set up your equipment. So again, you can record in your house, you can record in the studio, which is already set up, but keep it very simple. Whether it's just your laptop, maybe it's just 2 laptops, your laptop and your guest's laptop, in a different city, different country, but keep it simple. And then press record, right? This is where most people hesitate. They want to get everything perfect before they hit record. So, and finally, you edit your footage. So we're not going to talk about editing here, but you can edit your footage using an application called, Descript. I keep talking about Riverside. We don't work with them. We don't work for them, but Riverside can even edit your podcast, and then you publish it. Now that's the workflow. It's that simple. So again, plan your episode. Number 2, set up your equipment. Number 3, record, and then 4, actually it should be 4 and 5, edit, and then publish or distribute your podcast. Now, that's the workflow. Of course, there are many details within each step, but if you think about this way, it becomes more manageable. And most people don't fail because they don't do this. It's because they don't stick with it. Again, I've been talking about this for the whole webinar here, but most people fail because they don't stick with it. Now, a couple more topics here on the podcast itself, the technical side, is once you record your podcast, it has to live somewhere, and that's called a hosting platform. And this is where your episodes are stored. This is where they're stored, they're managed, and distributed from. And there are many platforms out there. There's Spotify for podcasters, there's Transistor, there's Captivate, and you'll pay typically, some are free, some, cost $100 a month or more. It depends. So if you're just doing one podcast, a single podcast, then it's typically like $20 a month. Whereas, you can launch multiple podcasts and create your own podcast network, and that's upwards of probably $100+ depending on which podcast hosting platform you use. And really, just think about this. This is like a server. It's where you're storing all of your podcast data, which is your episodes, right? So this is where everything is stored. Or it could be, you can relate it to like web hosting. So it's the same thing, right? So this is the home base for your podcast. Now, the what is an RSS feed? This is the really only technical term you really need to know about distributing and hosting your podcast is the RSS feed. It's basically the unique link that connects your podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcast. So it's needed. So think of it also as your home address, right? So whenever you get your mail, you need to, give whomever is sending your mail your address. So this is the address. Same thing. This is the address of your podcast. And so once it's set up, though, every time you upload an episode, it automatically goes everywhere. So just think of it as it's an auto distribution center for your podcast. So you upload everything to your host, and then your host has this RSS feed, which is your address, and it sends it off to Spotify and all that too. So you don't have to manually upload your podcast to every directory because your hosting platform does it. But you do have to set it up one time. But your hosting platform will do it for you. Now, once everything is connected, your podcast gets distributed to platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast. With YouTube, they do have a podcast option there. But yeah, so your podcast gets distributed to platforms. And what is cool is that there are many directories out there. There's iHeartRadio, there's even Audible. There's so many. But all you have to do is you just have to put your RSS feed into that directory or that platform, and then after that, that's all you do. It's done, right? And so this is actually how people find and listen to your content. So, if you have a Spotify account, you just search your podcast, you can find it there. If you're an Apple Podcast user, then you can find it there as well. So, but then again, it doesn't mean that anyone's going to actually find it. So we'll talk about that later. But here's the most important part: starting is easy, but growing is super hard. So anyone can start a podcast. It's but very few stay consistent. So we just went through how to start a podcast. We talked briefly about the equipment, the hosting provider, structuring your show. But anyone could buy a mic, anyone can hit record, and anyone can upload an episode. But growing your podcast, this is where things get difficult. That's where most people stop. And that's where people lose consistency. And that's where people don't see results. So the real question for everybody here is not how do I start, is how do I actually make this work? So moving on. So why do most podcasts not grow? It's not because they're not talented. It's not because they don't have good ideas. It's really because a few key things. Number one, they have no system, right? So they're just posting randomly, right? So they might be releasing their podcast on a Monday, and maybe they're teasing it on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube Shorts once a week. Maybe they skip a week, then they do it twice the next week. So they're just posting randomly, or maybe they're also posting their podcast randomly. So maybe they post their podcast once a week for 1 month, and then they take a break, and then the next month they post it twice, like every other week, and then they take another break. So they're just posting randomly. So there's no system. And then two, there's no real distribution strategy. They hit record, they upload, and they just hope people find it. And then again, consistency. They fall off after a few episodes. But most importantly, there's no clear path to results. No plan for what is actually supposed to lead to. Most people are creating content, but they're not building anything with it. Now, this is the secret sauce. So instead of just recording and posting, this is what you want to build: a content engine, right? Think of it as a process flow for your content. You start with one podcast, and then from that one podcast, you take 30 pieces of content, and those gets distributed across platforms. And that's what builds your audience. So it creates opportunities. And for some of you, it brings in clients. The podcast isn't the end goal, it's the starting point. And now let me show you what I mean by 30 pieces of content. From one episode, you can pull 10 to 20 short form clips. So if you're recording a 1 hour podcast, then you can take 30-second clips, you can take 10-second clips, you can take even a minute clips, and you can post that to all of your social media platforms, right? You can turn these key moments into social media posts. You can break down ideas into educational content. You can highlight important insights and even create promotional content around the episode. So 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 that's how you do it. So instead of creating content from scratch every day, you're pulling everything from one recording. Right? So you're not creating more content, you're getting more out of what you already create. So think about this. You have an hour long podcast, and you take 20 or 30 pieces of content from that. And then every day, every couple days, you post something from your podcast on your Instagram, your TikTok, it could be your YouTube shorts, it could be any platform that you have. And that's how people actually grow their podcast. Yes, the podcast episode is the basis of all of your content, but actually telling people about it, promoting it, it's the simple marketing principles apply. You just have to continuously post. You have to continuously put content up there, and from there, people will find your podcast. So the more active you are on social media, such as TikTok, such as Instagram, such as Facebook, your algorithm gets pushed up. Your content gets ranked even higher. Also on YouTube, as of course too. And then people will find you from your short form content, and they'll find your podcast, and your podcast will grow. Now that is a secret sauce, and we see, I don't know, 2% of the podcasters do that. They barely tease their podcast, they barely put highlights up there, and this is how you actually grow it. Now, this is where things get real. On paper, this totally makes sense, right? But in practice, this is where most people struggle. It's time consuming. You're recording, you're editing, you're posting. It requires consistency, and that's hard when you're busy. And it takes multiple skill sets: content, editing, distribution. And that's very easy to fall behind or stop completely. And this is why most podcasts don't turn into anything long term. And it's not that this doesn't work; it's that it's hard to execute consistently on your own. Now, what we do at Hello Studios, this is where we come in. We help you build and run your entire system. We help you with strategy, what to say, who you're targeting, how it all connects. We handle the recording, whether that's in studio or in remote or remotely. We take care of the editing and production. We turn your podcast into 30 pieces of content, but we also show you how to do that, so you're not always, reaching out to us. And then and help you stay consistent with distribution. So instead of you trying to manage all this, you have a system behind you, and we help you create a system behind you. And if you want to jump on a call, we can help you create that. But our goal is simple: to help you turn your podcast into something that actually works and grows. Now, this isn't for everyone, but it's a great fit if you fall into one of these categories. If you're a professional, like a realtor, therapist, consultant, and you want to build your brand or attract opportunities, if you are a business owner or part of a team looking to create content that's consistent, if you're a creator that's serious about growing and not just posting randomly, or honestly, if you just want consistency and real results, this is for you. And that's where this really works well. If you're just experimenting, you can absolutely do this on your own, and we can help you. But if you really want to do this to actually go somewhere, having a system matters. And that is basically anything in life, having a system. And so what this looks like over time, let me show you what this looks like in real life. So week 1, you record your podcast. Week 2, you publish it and start creating clips from it. And now you're not just posting one thing, you're starting to create multiple pieces of content from that one episode. And so that's what it looks like in paper and in practice. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast or taking it more seriously, the best next step is to book a call with us. And the QR code on the bottom, you can kind of take that and schedule a call. But on the call, we'll map out your podcast idea, your content approach, and how this can work for you. Will help you build your strategy and your process. And then there's no pressure, obviously. It's just a conversation to give you some clarity. And if it makes sense to work together, we can talk about it. If not, that's fine too. So, okay. And this is the last slide here. This is everything I wanted to cover. So, that's so now I'd like to open it up to questions. So feel free to ask anything, whether it's about starting with starting a podcast, whether it's about equipment, growth, or anything we talked about. Do we have any questions on the call? Raphael, do we have any questions? Okay, I'm checking the chat here. Okay, well, it looks like there are no questions, but if you want to reach out to us, you can. You can use that QR code. And again, just to wrap up, if you're here and you're serious about starting a podcast or taking it to the next level, don't try to figure it out on your own. Maybe ask a friend, maybe ask us. And again, if the fastest way to move forward is to get clarity on what this will look like for you. So if this is for you, just book a call, no pressure. We'll map everything out, and it'll just give you direction. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining, and have a great day. Bye, everybody.